Hey guys, what's up? Killjoy Jake here, and instead of having friends, I got this really cool Michael Myers pumpkin. Today we're going to be talking about the possible Paranormal Activity 7. There's a bunch of news articles on it, there's been some confirmation about a new one in the works. We're going to get into that, but first I'm going to need you to like this video and subscribe for all that horror content. Now let's get into this video. So earlier this year, Paramount CEO Jim Giannopoulos, I shouldn't even be trying to pronounce that, said that a new Paranormal Activity movie is in the works. Now, if you remember in the Ghost Dimension film, if you have any idea of what's going on in the lore of this series, Ghost Dimension kinda wrapped it up in a way that fans were not super happy about. Ghost Dimension went through absolute production hell, being delayed because they wanted rewrites, and there was just a whole bunch of casting problems as well. It took about 2.5 years to actually get this thing to the screen. If they do make another movie, I'd like to see something that either, one, erases Ghost Dimension completely from the timeline, or somehow explains it in a better, just a way that just wasn't Ghost Dimension. Just put a different spin on this ending that fixes it somehow. Paramount has just teamed up with Blumhouse, who, if you remember in the Halloween series, their new one that came out in 2018, they said, let's just forget the rest of the movies and just remember the very first original classic. We're just gonna go off of that. So they might just erase Ghost Dimension from time and space. I personally love the Paranormal Activity movies, but even if you hate them, you have to respect them. The first movie had a $15,000 budget, which is unheard of for a horror movie, and then made $193 million worldwide gross. That is the highest profit margin for any film of all time. Of course, the rest of the movies in this series were given higher budgets, but they still all made a crap ton of money. Even Ghost Dimension, that had a $10 million budget and then only made $73 million. That's still a huge profit margin. Now let's talk a little bit about the lore of Paranormal Activity. Where could we go in this series that is almost kind of open and shut now? So the first Paranormal Activity centers around two characters, and that's Katie Featherstone and then Micah Sloat. They just moved in together, and then suddenly they noticed that a whole bunch of crazy stuff is happening in their house. The big thing about these movies is that if you have to see the last one to see the next one, and it really does have this interesting plot that goes throughout these whole 6 movies. So basically, without giving away too much, at the end of the first Paranormal Activity movie, Katie is possessed by the demon, which is, we find out later, his name is Toby, which is probably the most disappointing name you could give a ghost that harasses so many people. And what you find out in the second movie is that the first one actually takes place within the second movie. So the reason that they were possessed was because Katie's sister, Christy, actually sent the ghost to their house saying, we're getting rid of this thing, we're gonna give it to my sister instead. And then of course Katie comes to their house, kills both of them, steals Hunter, and then we can basically move on to the next movie. So Hunter is this kid that they're going to try and use to give Toby a new body. You're thinking maybe possess this kid when he gets a little older or something. But of course, the sequels kind of ruin that whole aspect. The third movie is a flashback to the 1980s of what happened with Katie and Christy when they were younger, and we get to learn a little more about their crazy grandmother who's a little weird. Basically, we find out that Katie and Christy are in this cult because of their grandmother. There's just still a lot of questions from this third movie that I would like to see answered in a new Paranormal Activity 7. Then there's the fourth movie, which is interesting. I don't really know why the fourth movie exists, but it does. We find out that sometime after the second movie, which this is getting confusing, I understand, somehow Hunter was given up for adoption, which I'm not really sure how that works, where we need some answers here on that part, but somehow Hunter was giving up for adoption, and he's now with this new family, who so conveniently lives across the street from the witch coven we see in Paranormal Activity 3. Hunter somehow gets taken away by Katie once again, and then we see the final girl character get attacked by a giant coven of witches. It's probably the most famous scene from this is when she walks into the witch coven house and she sees like 400 people just coming at her, a bunch of witches. Super crazy ending to that movie. That's the one good thing I can say about it. Then there's Paranormal Activity, the marked ones. This is kind of just a separate thing off from the rest of the series. It doesn't have a whole lot to do with this series, except literally the last 2 minutes of this movie are the only important aspects of it that add anything to the actual plot. Somehow the main character is transported back to the first movie, and we get to see what went down when Katie went downstairs and screamed for Micah, and then of course we see that she came back up, throws Micah at the camera, and that's the end of the first movie. And if you didn't think this series was screwed up enough, well, Ghost Dimension just bends this series over and screws it to death. So we get some flashbacks to what happened after Paranormal Activity 3 with Katie and Christy, and we find out that they're training to find some little girl in the future, and it happens to be the daughter of the characters in Ghost Dimension. What sucks about Ghost Dimension and what is so interesting about the rest of these movies is we never actually see Toby. We never see the monster. It's just like a burst of wind or something. What sucks about this movie is Toby is an actual CGI monster in this film. All the scares are really predictable, and like I said, it went through absolute production hell, so it's not a very fantastic movie and not a great way to close out your series. To give you the very basic and simple run of what happens in this film, Toby is given a body because they get a little drop of blood or something from their daughter. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Hunter's involved. We see him in some of the flashbacks from the 80s footage. Toby's incarnation then kills the mother, the last character, and then Toby has a body now. So Toby's gonna run around and kill people in real life now. I feel like that's actually limiting. I don't know why Toby needed a body. That was the end goal, was to give Toby a human form. I don't really understand that. I feel like he was more powerful when he was just a demon opening doors and messing around with people. So I'd like to see something new come out of this. Maybe a brand new ending. Maybe we just completely erase Ghost Dimension and then we write a new ending. Even if it's a bad ending. I don't mind if it's a bad ending, if Toby comes to life again or something. Just not how Ghost Dimension did it. That was just, it was so forced. It was such a forced film that I really just wish didn't happen, if I'm being totally honest with you. So will Paranormal Activity 7 happen? Definitely, I think so. Apparently it's in the works, according to Jim, whatever the hell his last name is. I'm very excited to see it when it does come out. Hopefully next year is what my guess is, if they're already working on it. These films don't take a lot of effort, mainly in the writing room, but in the filming it's not too difficult, I can't imagine. But thank you so much for watching my video. Please make sure to like this video and subscribe if you're digging all this horror content. Please follow me on Twitter at KilljoyJake1, and don't forget to kill it out there, y'all.